Welcome to the STATMed podcast, where we teach you how to study in med school and how to pass board-style exams. Your host is Ryan Orwig, a learning specialist with more than a decade of experience working with med students and physicians. In this episode, Ryan and Dr. Jim Culhane, Assistant Dean for Student Academic Success Programs and Professor of Pharmaceutical Sciences at Notre Dame of Maryland University School of Pharmacy, share their insights on preparing for medical boards. In part 2, they dig into strategies med students can use when preparing for the board.
So if we teach them how to find structure on the upfront, then it greases the wheels and everything accelerates downstream. So you can do this in a variety of ways, I think. The way that I do it is through the skill that we've developed called frameworking. With the use and utility of practice questions.
Right. So what you're saying is you've got two real tracks or approaches to board prep. You've got the study component to it, where you're interfacing with the materials that your school provided or that you purchased, and then you've got the practice question side, where you're actually where you're actually going to mimic exam or test taking in the test taking environment in that way.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I look at it. I consider board prep as a dual track process where you have two silos side by side,
Right.
and they cross over, they overlap, but they are two separate entities. The study side, that's where we're organizing, enriching, fortifying our knowledge. I think a lot of people don't know at this level how to figure out, what do I know concretely? What do I not know? And then where am I fuzzy? Where are the holes? Now,
Okay.
and again, it's going to vary from one person to the next. And there are methods, study methods, that can be used to absolutely fix this and address this. Right.
Now, let me ask you this question. What are some of the common things that you see students do wrong with this, with the studying component for board prep? What are some of those things that they do that are just, that can give them low yield methods that they might use? Right. What are some of those things?
Yeah, we're talking about like just low yield study methods, right? So this is just watching and rewatching videos without any kind of proper setup. This is and then banking that, like, hey, I just covered that, therefore I know it because I watched it once or twice. Like that's again, that to me is an office drone mentality. Like, I'm getting paid because I punched the time clock. How productive were you today? Doesn't matter. The boss is going to pay me. I'm on salary. But if I'm the entrepreneur and I'm like, I worked all day, like, what do you have to show for what you accomplished? I mean, sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's a long day of bumping my head against the wall. Sometimes it is, I go down a rabbit hole and it's not fruitful, So again, you have to own what you're doing. Like, how much yield are you actually getting? Maybe another mentality would be at the gym. Just because I go to the gym and hang out for 2 hours a day every day doesn't mean I'm getting as good of a workout as the person who's there for in and out in 45 minutes doing a high intensity regimented workout.
Right.
Like, just because I'm there, I might be hanging out and socializing. Maybe I'm lifting weights, but then stopping when I start to truly struggle and I'm not getting the benefit. So again, it's not all studying is equal for all people, and you can deploy different strategies. So obviously then, if I'm reading and rereading material, obviously one of the highest, low yield things. If I am highlighting and underlining, if I'm rotely recopying. Now, a lot of people are going to, at boards level, they've mostly realized you can't recopy everything. One of the common things you hear from going from undergrad and master's programs into med school or pharmacy school, they realize, like, oh, I used to succeed by rewriting everything, and now I can't because there's so much speed, volume, density, fire hose. Now, hopefully they figured that out by the time they get to boards. That's not going to work. But we still believe, a lot of people still believe that is the big money maker, and it's not.
We're condensing notes. That's what I see a lot of my students doing. They're recopying, condensing, and unfortunately, with this board prep stuff, like the board prep book that we use at our school, it's very, very condensed already. It's it's been boiled down to the essential elements. So there's not much more condensing that you can do, and even with that, there's still a ton of information that you have to assimilate.
Well, and then, yeah, but it's this idea that by condensing, I'm going to then get yield from
Right.
it.
Which we know doesn't work.
And then also it's like the snowplow effect, or, this of massed learning, where they're like, and that's where you're like, I'm on this page, I'm on this chapter, I'm on this slide. I'm going to burn it into my brain now because I'm not going to get back to it. So it's like this, just like burn, literally trying to sear it into their brains by staring at it or repping it.
Yep.
And this is getting into that learning science of it's mass learning. They're not getting into distribution and interleaving and all that stuff. But these are the things that got people there from undergrad to masters, what have you. Those things those skills, I guess we have to say those skills work. I mean, I hate to say it, but like those things do work well enough in other academic arenas. And people believe that stuff works, but just because you think it works doesn't mean it does.
It's environment specific. Yeah, certainly you can get some short-term benefit from cramming and mass studying, like you pointed out. But when you're studying for board exam over weeks or months, long-term retention is really key. And fortunately, I think the benefit for students that are studying for boards is hopefully they have some foundational knowledge of this material, that they're not starting from scratch like they might in a course in the didactic curriculum that they're
they might or they might not. Yeah, or they might or might not.
Professor, we hope that they do.
I mean, I tell people even like struggling to get through those first few years. Like one of the bigger problems you see in like a first or second year student, it's gonna be a pharmacy student, a med student, what have you, is like they're so worried about boards. Yeah. And I'm like, look, right now you focus on this upcoming block exam.
Right.
But what if I don't learn it well enough for boards? I'm like, I hear you, but you've got to put, we got to sequentialize our priorities. So in that sense, the fact is,
if you learn it well the first time and you use good learning strategies, not will all of it stick with you? No, but a big chunk of it will, and you'll be better.
It'll make it easier.
Make it easier when you get ready to prepare for the boards. Absolutely.
Yes. So, but those are a lot of those low yield study methods that we've got. I mean, and again, if somebody's like, these skills, they're not a problem until they're a problem. So a lot of the people that we meet are coming to us because of first, second year problems, and we put them through our STATMed study skills class or our one-on-one study skills course, and we fix it then. But I've certainly met people at a boards level, even like downstream, like secondary, tertiary boards, where that's where it becomes a problem. I mean like emergency medicine doctors all the time. They're like, I never even struggled, but now I'm like I'm living my life and I'm working and I've got kids and a family, and the old study methods are no longer working. And then they want to default back to rereading, rewatching, just iterate. And it's that wrong kind of effort. It's the wrong kind of desirable difficulties, whatever we want to say on the learning science side of it, right? So we've got to avoid all of that. Now somebody might be like, but they just described how I study, minus the other piece. So again, to bring back to my dual track, I believe on the one side, you've got all the study side stuff. Okay. The learning, the organizing of the information, the encoding, the retrieval, attempts at retrieval. That's where I want people to get to. I think you should be setting yourself up and getting to organized retrieval practice as early as possible and as frequently as possible. Okay. That's the study side. You do not need practice questions to engage in retrieval practice. This is one of the big misconceptions.
Right.
And so the second silo is anything and everything to do with practice questions. So that's using untimed tutor mode, practice tests, timed runs, doing them on the computer, doing them out of a book, I don't care, but ultimately simulating the test environment. That's everything under the practice question silo. Do I think that's important? Of course, it's super important. Here's the thing. It's certainly what I see a lot in medical education and on the med school side and a lot of like doctor specialty board side. It's almost exclusively doing practice questions. And so when I was talking to the student the other day, and she's like, oh, when I'm studying at night, I get really frustrated when I miss these questions. And so right there, I'm like, bzz, 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 like, wait.
My student had that experience yesterday in class when we were going through questions, I'm sure.
Yeah, but for me, conceptually, I'm like, let's change our vocabulary and change our framework. I was like, I would not call that studying. I would call that doing questions, doing practice, running questions. She was in silo 2, and she was making it, but the vocabulary studying made it sound like, I'm like, wait, are you going through pathoma? Are you watching like some in first aid? Are you reading something out of first aid? Where were? Oh, no. I was using this question bank. So again, and so I sort of explained like everything's under the board prep umbrella. You have the study side when you're using like a resource book or lecture series to put information in and organize, retrieve, or the test practice question side with the question bank. And she found that reframing of that to be very helpful. Just so that we could have a conversation about it, but also so she could be a little more in control of her planning and moderating of herself as she moves forward.
So let me ask you a couple more specific follow-up questions about this, because I think this is so important for the listeners. When we're talking about the dual tracks here, the study track and the practice question kind of track here to prepping for boards, what's some advice or maybe some techniques or approaches that students can use in the study component of this preparation to engage in active recall or self-testing, and also how can they interface effectively with these dense board prep materials, like a board prep book with, summaries or condensed versions of topics there. So do you have any specific advice or approaches that they might be able to use in order to navigate that part?
I mean, what I think is, we know that once you read something once,
right,
rereading it is diminishing returns.
Right.
It's
we know that.
Right. I know that people are going to feel more comfortable reading and rereading at this level. They don't want to try to attempt recall of the information without reading it 3 or 4 times.
Right.
I'm all for, if you're reading a physical book, I like use a dry erase board, and read the subheading or subheading. And instead of reading the answers below it, write out what you think it's going to be, abbreviate what you think is coming up. It's a form of a self-test. Mm-hmm. Then you do read it, but you're now self-checking it as you go.
Okay.
That's a simple hack. The old school note cards, I'm not a big believer in note cards. I think it fragments the information, but use a single note card and just cover as you read below. So if you got the subheading, read that, try to anticipate, try to recall. You're going to get your butt absolutely kicked doing this. You will not remember hardly anything. And so it takes away a lot of the motivation to do this, but it will solidify the reading of it. Everybody says, oh, I want to be active when I read. We all know active reading is better than passive reading, but what are you actually doing to be active? Like, right. Reading should be more of a self-quizzing experience but there's no consequence. And then the problem with all this is it does solidify the memory, but you don't get like a ticker tape printout, printing out of your head saying your knowledge just solidified by 24%.
Right.
You just feel like, wow, I knew nothing on that page.
So as you're saying what you're saying, and we've talked about this before. So if you're reading, a dense passage or something in the text, taking some time after you've read that to try to remember what you've read, to summarize it, to even write down basic questions about the passage that you just read that you can use to test yourself later on.
People definitely can do marginal questions. As you're reading it, you take the information, you break it apart, you configure it into a question, you write it in the margin, then you can go back and quiz yourself in the margins. Mm-hmm. That's a lo-fi way of doing it. It gives you a bottom-up way to reapproach the information. Obviously, I think about all this, and I'm like, I want to framework it all. I want to use our framework, super framework strategies.
Why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because I know you've developed a number of different approaches that students can use very effectively to, engage with content material like this. Obviously, we can't get into it in a lot of detail in a podcast setting like this, but maybe you could describe it briefly to our listeners in terms of what that entails.
Yeah, well, big picture, I think that, let me just speak conceptually, and I think this speaks to boards issues. what I'm thinking about all the time now are what I'm calling bottom-up learners versus top-down learners.
Mm-hmm.
I think most students in this field, in the field of medicine, pharmacy, veterinary med, what have you, are fully proficient bottom-up learners.
All right, what
Meaning
does that
they can learn from fragmented details. They can just jam all kinds of disconnected details into the closet of their memory, close the closet. They've got these, what I call these elves, like little fairy elves coming in, waving their magic wands, boop, 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 and then the closet opens and everything's organized. Hierarchically, everything goes where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bottom-up learner. These are the people that benefit from Anki. They're learning, they're taking information, they're shattering it into fragments, jam it in the closet, poof, open it, it's all organized. Organization means it's encoded with effective retrieval access pathways so that they can access it in the future. These are people who are also, we talked about the study side silo, the practice side, the practice question silo. There are many, many people. They are bottom-up learners, and they are studying primarily, if not exclusively, through practice questions. Now, but practice questions are just elaborate, dressed up, fragmented scenarios filled with like highly nutritious, high yield factoids in the explanations. But it's still a bottom-up learning methodology or approach. And again, they're taking all these disconnected, I mean, they're contextualized in a small scenario, but that small scenario, if you plugged it into the larger framework of the review book for the test, for the NAVLE, the NAPLEX, the USMLE, it's just it's a drop in the ocean of the water. It's a drop of water in the ocean. So they are learning from bottom up conceptualization. It's not wrong. It's great for them because it works. And I think this comes to a from a very fundamental aspect of how they're wired and how they're built. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that percentage of them are. Is it 30%, 40%, 80%? I don't know. Probably depends from school to school.
Yes.
Okay.
Percentage of students that think that way and operate that way. And by the way, I wish my brain operated that way, but it doesn't.
We know mine. We know mine doesn't. So the other side of that equation, the opposite side of the coin, is the top-down learner. These are people who require explicit organizational structures built on the upfront to then house the information. So these people, if they take all the fragments, these are the people that are really frustrated by Anki learning. These are the people who are like, I'm doing questions, but it's not all sticking together the way I needed to, knowledge-wise. These are the people that they jam the fragments in the closet, they close the closet. There's no elves. The elves don't come.
You open the closet.
It's still a mess. Eventually they open it. Now it's like leaky. There's like water damage in the corner. There's a hole over here. There's like an electrical fire happening. It's not working.
Yeah, that's my brain to a T.
That's me. It's me. So they are top-down learners. Okay. These people need a step in between. Can they live without it? I mean, yeah, but they're living more. It's more painful. It's less efficient. It's more at risk.
Yeah.
More work, and so much unnecessary work.
Yes.
Toiling. Okay. So if we teach them how to find structure on the upfront, then everything greases the wheels and everything accelerates downstream. So you can do this in a variety of ways. I think the way that I do it is through the skill that we've developed called frameworking.
Now, you're when you're talking about finding the organization or superstructure, you're referring to finding that in a board's prep book. That's like a chapter. Let's say you have a chapter on infectious disease that's 70 pages long. So this process, you can approach it from two ways. From a bottom-up learning standpoint, you could just do 200 practice questions that are associated with that particular chapter and drill them over and over again. And if you're not a bottom-up type of person, it's just not going to be very effective or efficient for you. If you're a top-down learner, what you need to find is the overall superstructure of the chapter. You need to use a learning process that helps you to deconstruct the chapter and then reconstruct it so that you can find some of the structure to it, or
to a degree. So frameworking was developed primarily when I was looking at the advice that a lot of med students are given to preview a lecture. So I developed frameworking as a plug-in for lecture-based learning, and I felt like I was teaching previewing or pre-reading, and it felt like a bunch of garbage. I was like, this is not going to help me. Yeah, it's familiarizing me with some topics, but it took something that was vague and made it slightly less vague, but still super mushy. So I'm not a big fan. And I was like, I'm not going to teach this. This is not helpful. It's a very like, I think one of the biggest fears you have as an instructor, especially when you're dealing with learning strategies, especially learning strategies for highly intelligent people under extremely high stakes, like med school, vet school, pharmacy school, is the emperor has no clothes. That to me is the biggest fear. You do not want to be up there preaching something to these people under these stakes, under these circumstances, and not actually be able to put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
And I felt like previewing was like a big one of that. So we ended up finding that like there are aspects of previewing that could actually unlock all this stuff. And so that's where we really developed this ability. Can I go in and extract? And I'm going to talk about this in a lecture-based model before talking about how you extrapolate, flip it over to dense review book or textbook study.
Okay.
And this is like frameworking, put very simply, is you're at the bird's eye view and you're coming down with like a claw and ripping out the skeletal structure. So if you're coming down on a map of a city,
yeah,
and it's got the roads and the rivers and the parks and the yards and the houses and the buildings and all that, and you're just getting the claw is like ripping out just the streets, just the streets, just the skeletal structure. And that can be achieved through what I call like multiple nonlinear passes through the text, emphasizing hierarchy. Okay. And so it's an act of seeking and finding and searching. It gives the learner something to do with a finite scope. And it is a matter of it's a reading strategy. It's a nonlinear reading strategy. We're taught to read linearly. It's really hard to get out of that paradigm, but it's totally doable. And then it's like you're finding the schema, and then you're able to then build around it. It'd be like trying to teach somebody about World War II without having any historical or geopolitical or geographical understanding. Like if you told me to learn about, I don't know, sort of like the colonialism in India, like British colonialism in India. I mean, I know it happened, and I know more now than I did. But like, if you asked like 18-year-old me, where I came to like the American school system, where it was all very centric on, through the American lens, I would have had nothing. So if I'm watching a drama set in colonial, I've got, and there's like social factors going on. Like I don't know anything. It's going to be a lot harder for me to understand that movie or read that book and have understanding of the deep context. I'm probably going to have less retention because I don't have the framework for it. Right. So if you have framework, you're going to retain more. You're going to have background knowledge. But I think framework is more specific than just general background knowledge. For example, because background knowledge is crucial for good reading retention. But I can't really watch like one of your lectures and pull a lot away from it because it's not my specialty, right? But if I framework one of your lectures, which I can do as a lay person, I actually am learning stuff because I've now built the skeletal structure to build stuff around. Yeah, and that's pretty fascinating. So we then realized we could flip that skill and extrapolate it upwards to textbook reading, to review books. And I was like, yeah, maybe it'll work for 30 pages. Maybe it'll work for 50 pages. I mean, we can apply it. I've had people apply it to chapters that are over 100 pages, 100 plus pages.
Right. With a 100-page chapter, where do you even start? I mean, so this is a great way to start interfacing. You
start from that bird's eye view. Now, I don't know how helpful this conversation is because I feel like it's probably more frustrating than anything because the only way for frameworking to truly work is to really get into all the nitty gritty details of it. So I would say, if we're talking about getting into how we can approach the thing, I think even just a staging ground of, all right, how many chapters do I have? How many pages are in each chapter? How many days do I have on a calendar? Let me at least start breaking, like do like a staging area where I can at least start to conceptualize that. Okay, and then and if I can't do a whole framework of a 100-page chapter, at least do like, okay, how many sections are there? At least do that, like the top. Let me start breaking the 100 pages down. Oh, it's actually 8 sections, ranging from 10 to 20 pages.
Right. So
now I'm
most books have subheadings and subheadings, and you can start to, at least in some way, even in a rudimentary way, start to see the skeletal framework of a chapter by looking at the different headings within a chapter and subheadings and subheadings. It's not fully frameworking, but at least it gives you a place to start working from. Correct?
Well, yes. And what I'll see people do, though, is since these things are a little more professionally written and edited, they'll just offload the seeking and finding of the structure because it's there in front of my face. Don't fall into that trap.
Yeah.
Still take the time to seek and find and delineate for yourself. The seeking and finding is actually, and again, you're not actually quote unquote learning the way that you think you're learning, but you are actively seeking and finding and starting to build those conceptual frameworks that you will benefit from. Again, I think students are, again, that to me, that's a microcosm of drone versus entrepreneur. If you're like, oh, well, they've already done the organization for me and broken it into these sections, I'm just going to read through it. You're now defaulting to drone. No, roll the sleeves up, do some work, and skim ahead. Like do some superficial like recon and foraging and be like, oh, okay, this is 10 pages, 30 pages, 5 pages. Start breaking that up and start understanding the outlay of it. That is structural. That starts to put you more in control. But to flip back though to the top down versus bottom up approach, I think a bottom up learner, we talked about those ones who can learn from fragments. They probably, and I don't know, maybe I think they can probably learn better sitting in lecture and listening linearly through the lecture. Because it's fragments one step after the other, but they don't see how it all connects. They can probably better sit down and read a 50, 80, 100 page chapter in a textbook or a review book and get more yield from it because it's like they are details in a sequence. The top down learner, you tell them to sit down and just listen to this lecture, they're going to fall off the train. You tell them to sit down and start reading through those 50 pages. 20 pages in, they're like blah 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 blah. They're punching that clock. They're not owning it. They're not connecting it. They're not deconstructing it. So again, I think that there are different ways that these models impact the learning experience. And ideally, in a future context, I would like to find a way to sift these people into proper tracks and then proactively intervene with them, because I think there's a certain subset that really, really benefit from not just plugging linearly away through it, while some are fine with it.
All right, so let me see if I can summarize here for a second, because there's a lot that you said, and a lot to unpack there. So some of the things not to do when you're sitting down with your board's prep book, and let's say you're beginning to study a chapter, okay? Just plowing into the chapter of the book without doing, like you said, some recon or some deconstruction work and trying to see, what's coming up ahead, how's the book organized, how it's structured. You don't want to reread chapters over and over again. You don't want to highlight things. You don't want to recopy things. But you really want to be able to, like you said, act as an entrepreneur. You want to take that material, that chapter, let's say, for example, that you're looking into, and try to determine how it's organized and the structure and hierarchy to the material that's there. And that can help you interface with the material better. Now, again, we can't go into the details of frameworking here. A podcast just isn't really going to work with that. But that kind of technique can help you to achieve that quickly and efficiently. Correct?
Yeah. I mean, it's better. And again,
Thanks for tuning in to the STATMed podcast. If you like the show, we hope you'll subscribe. You can find more test taking and studying strategies specifically developed for med students and physicians over at our blog, statmedlearning.com. Thanks for listening.